Welcome. Get to the right slide, sorry. So today I am talking about automation, specifically with Jenkins. So I gave a similar talk at MidCamp, which is online. I've got links later. My name is Michael Porter. I'm the lead developer at Xenomedia in the Chicagoland area. I've been doing Drupal since 2009 and did my first line of code way back in '79, in elementary school. So overview, we'll be talking about kind of a little bit why Jenkins, a little bit on why we should automate, and trying to help you choose a little bit on things to automate, and kind of the structured code, but mostly will be some sample code and demo. I will very likely have time for Q&A at the end, so if you have questions, feel free. So first question, of course, is, should I change the order? So why should we automate? There's various reasons. One, procedurally, if you've got a long list of things, we are all human. We're very likely to miss information, miss steps along the way, forget things when we're in a hurry. So having a process or a robot or something do those steps for you, you're less likely to forget something along the way. Okay, what could be like? Other reasons, if you have an automated process to check code, you can make a commit, submit it, get back to working. There's less task switching, which, every interruption causes more delay and things like that. So the more that you can have working in the background, the less you have to kind of break away from what you're doing and just solve problems when they arise. So Jenkins I chose primarily because you can host your own and play with it before you really dive into other things. But there's thousands of plugins available. You can pretty much extend it in any way that you can think about. And recently they've come up with a Docker image, so you can actually run Jenkins on your local environment in smaller pieces, as well as your main server, your testing servers, things like that. And then choosing what to automate is sometimes the hardest process in figuring out what pieces should we automate, what needs human interaction. At Xeno, we don't ever deploy without a human saying it's okay. We haven't quite got to the process where we trust ourselves enough to just let things go live. But there's certain processes, of course, like doing a database backup, getting a database from a production server locally. We have some scripts in place for doing that and make it really easy for developers who may not be savvy with whether it's command line or something else, where you can create a nice script. They can pull it down, extract it, and do everything that they need to do. The other thing that I like to do is, Asian Efficiency has this nice quote: anything that bothers you 3 times, you need to find a permanent, systematic solution for it. So, if there's something you're repeating and doing often, find a way to make it easier, even if it's just a copy and paste snippet tool. One example workflow, this is incomplete, but we have a module on our Drupal sites that tells our ticketing system if there's any updates, which alerts the developer, who can then fire off a process to run the updates and goes through a whole deploy cycle. So if you start thinking about the steps that you're doing within a project, then you can start seeing, okay, this piece we can send off to something. This piece is taking too long for a developer, or taking away from a skill set that they're maybe not good at, and hand it off to a system that can do the process for them. So that's the first part. So code samples and demos. Most of what I'm doing with the Jenkins process is taking like bash scripts that we've run before and putting it within the Jenkins environment. So Jenkins has especially in Jenkins 2, has a pipeline workflow, which is very similar in structure to JavaScript, except there's certain code things. It's actually written in Groovy, if you're familiar with Java itself. And we're using, there's some special plugins there, Milestone, Lock, and Node. Well, Node's not a plugin, but that allow us to lock in a section of code so that nothing else can process on it while we're working it. So it's project-based. So we're not doing a database update on a project in the middle of running testing. Milestones will allow you to, if you've got multiple developers working on a project and they submit code at the same time, the milestone will stop the first one and continue on the second one because you're really running the same test. So you don't necessarily need to run the test for every piece of code that comes in, but you can run it for the batch if somebody's making a series of commits. So as you structure it, you can cut down your server time as well by doing some steps like that. So the first process, at least, is getting a backup of the database, and you can certainly sanitize. But as you can see, it's very straightforward. This is the entirety of the script, and it's 3 steps. We do a cleanup, so remove any previous backup that we might have made. SSH in and run the Drupal dump with the path. You can certainly add your excludes and anything else that you want to the command, sanitize commands, and then SCP it down to the local environment where you want it. Very straightforward, very simple. There's really no reason not to do this. If you're on Pantheon or Acquia, Pantheon has Terminus. You can run a Terminus command to do the exact same thing and pull it down. So, and this is kind of a screenshot, where it's in the middle of a backup, and the pipeline gives you a nice grid, and you can see where a process failed along the way. If something failed, there's no examples in this screenshot. So, very straightforward, very nice reporting, and that you can see what's going on. The second phase, or the second thing that I'm sharing, is behat testing. I'm probably going way too fast. So behat, as you know, is command line as well. So once you have your structure set up, I don't have any examples of that here. It's just your behat format, and if you do a format for JUnit and save it, then you can process it using Jenkins JUnit reporter, and you get a graph of the tests that run, and you can actually drill in to those tests, or you can see, if something fails, you can see how many failed. And I guess I didn't get a screenshot. I can show you later because I've got one local, where you can drill in and see what tests run, see what tests failed, and exactly where the errors are.
So these screenshots are from a Jenkins UI?
Yeah, I've got one over on the other tab. When I get done, I'll kind of go through the UI a little bit. But yeah, see, with the various reporting, yes?
Sorry. Can you go back like 3 slides? I didn't get a good chance to.
Yeah. So that's really all you need for behat once you get the behat set up. You might include on your server, composer update, those, extra commands to make sure you're running fresh. But it's pretty straightforward to have it. Yeah. Yep. Another test that you can run, and we run these on every commit. So coding standards. not every developer has it locally. We have some developers actually put it in their pre-commit to make sure that they can't commit unless their code is clean. But it's a little more involved with this one. We've got some configurations basically to ignore errors and warnings because we don't want the job to fail. We want it to be able to get down to the check style to give us a report of what failed. If the job fails above, then Jenkins won't process the report. So we'd rather have it fail on different standards. I'll give an example too of where you can get this check style code. Within Jenkins, when you're running pipeline, they actually have a pipeline builder built into Jenkins where you can say what process you want to do and fill in the variables and get the code. So it makes things really simple that way. And then on the check style trends, I introduced an error into just the example module to see, to get the results. So you can see if you're ebbing and flowing and growing. We have one legacy site that has like 4,000 issues. The site obviously works, but it's just not clean code. So you can set your scale on what's a failure to. So if you're starting with something that's high, you don't want it to fail immediately. And when you drill into the reporting for the behat or for the code check, you get a nice yellow line that says here's where the code is, and this says it's missing the short description. So you can see what the issue is and decide, how you want to fix it, or if you want to just increase your thresholds and roll with it. Another important thing. We use Slack. I imagine most everyone is using Slack in some capacity. Slack has a webhook input. So if if you don't have access, ask whoever manages your site to get you a webhook key. And within webhook, you tell it what channel you want to post it to for the webhook. You can actually change that in code once you get a webhook, as long as it's a public channel that you can tap into. So you can't post to private channels through the webhook specifically, but you can do any of the public channels in your group. And then on the Jenkins side, it's just enter your base URL, store your key, or store that webhook as a private key so it's not exposed to everyone and it's not in code. List your base channel that you want everything to go to. And then on your check, it's 3 Slack send and then 3 simple messages. If you use default color, you've got good, warn, and danger will be your red, yellow, and green statuses, or you can do a custom color if you want for something special. I don't think I got a screenshot, but you've seen the messages where you've got the bar color with the lock code, and then whatever message you want to send, whether it's a test failed, the site's ready for deploy, whatever you need to do. You can run tests in parallel. So, see if I can highlight here. This diff steps allows you to create an array of substeps, and then when you run parallel steps, it will run the behat tests, the code tests, and the unit test simultaneously. Maybe you don't want to do the behat with the code tests because behat might be adding stuff and things like that. But just as an example, checking out the consistency of your code, that's not going to change while you're running PHP unit or something else. So, there's things that you can do simultaneously to save time. Other tests that you can run, some of them we have, some we're not. There's an integration with Browser Stack, so you can run that. PHP unit I mentioned there. PHP mess detector. Site speed actually has a nice Jenkins integration Docker, so you can create a job that creates a nice dashboard for it. Or really anything that you can think of. If you can do it in command line or it has a API that you can pass information to, you can trigger it. So another piece that we do, I don't know how many people use Pantheon, but Pantheon's famous for their multi-dev environment. On our staging server for the sites that aren't Pantheon hosted, we actually created our own multi-dev environment. So using Multibranch pipeline, each project has a Jenkins file in it, which runs a process for building the site if it's new, running in configuration updates, running the test, and then if it's the master branch, there's a deploy script within it. And as you see here, we've got the different branch, master branch, which had some failures on it at some point, feature demo, so I've got an example of that as well that I'll show when I get to the interface. In the Jenkins file, I've got 5 parts laid out here to kind of give an overview of what goes in it. And the first part is really just your setup. The properties section, days to keep and numbers to keep is kind of a crucial thing. If you keep all your jobs in Jenkins forever, it eventually starts to slow down. So coming up with, I want to keep 10 jobs or I only want to keep things for 7 days, this defines it for each branch. So, master branch, we're keeping things for 7 days or the last 5 builds. So if you haven't run anything for a while, you might get down to like just the last build that we're in. There's other parameters and properties that you can set based upon the job that gets created. The second part, is defining all of your variables. So what's the site folder? We have some projects where, like Drupal 8, the site folder is web. So you want to make sure you define where that is within the code. Set your database users, the password that you're going to use on your staging server. Hopefully it's private. You could even set a random generator and use something from Drupal or from Jenkins itself, or set something in Jenkins if you don't want to expose it in code. And other variables that you need within your script. And that's really nice too, so that you can reuse the second or the bottom part of the script across multiple sites, copy and paste it to a new site, change your variables, and you should have something that works for everything. The second or the third part of the script, which is really the first part that does actual work, our build step. And what I usually do with that is check to see, went backwards, check to see if like default settings, our settings local is there, or if there's an htaccess file, some sort of trigger that says there's a site that's already built, so we don't want to recreate a database and that sort of thing with it. And then your build step that you need to do. I wrap the build with a timeout. We have one site that the database is 1.5 gigs and takes about 20 minutes to build. So without wrapping the timeout, if the job fails. And then whatever process you need to build the site. So in this case, we're actually calling a separate job that exists on the Jenkins server. It's a global job. Step 2 in the process, which we do on every setup, is the config, where we do our checkout of the git, do any composer installs, clear caches, enable any dev modules if we need to, that sort of thing. Step 3 is where we run all of our tests. Each site, depending upon the stage of development we're in, has various tests, so that will kind of be custom per site. This ensures that every time there's a commit, we're doing some sort of testing with it so we catch things early. And then kind of the deploy structure. So if it's master and the current is success, then do whatever your deploy script is, whether it's build code and FTP it. We use deploy bot, whether it's a Pantheon, move the site, through, that's going to vary depending upon. And then if it fails, certainly send an alert to Slack and say something's wrong with master, don't deploy anything. And then if it's another branch, we just say, the staging environment's ready to look at. So allows you to really do, what did I do? Allows you to really do anything. Did I hit something? Oh, I clicked on a link. So demo. This is the Jenkins environment. It's pretty plain. Like I said, this is actually running I created a Docker image, which I have a link to in the slides. But if you search Docker Hub for Michael P. Porter /Jenkins-PHP, it's a PHP 7 Docker image, and then you can tie that into any of your projects just by doing a sync with your code directory, and then you can actually run your processes on the code that you're doing. So starting with the Drupal Multibranch, and apparently I need to log in. So with the Jenkins Multibranch, I don't know if I have internet to create a new branch, but if we drill into master, you can see early stages while I was setting it up, I had some failures with the config. This was first time doing it within the Docker environment, so permissions and things like that set up. But you can see, maybe, guess I'm not doing anything with that section of the log. The config, you can get a report of what ran within the environment. Or within the job itself, you can get a full console output of everything that processed. And if you've got tests on it, which I don't have in this particular case, but you get a nice report per site of the build and what's going on with it. And this is per commit. You can see here that there was no changes, no commit. If I say build now, I think it took, yep. You watch it kind of roll through the process. Or if you want to see the code as it happens, So it's a really, really slick, hands-off kind of thing for creating a new branch. Under the pipeline examples, I don't know if there's anything specific you want to see. We've got about 15 minutes, so with behat, you can see over here, you get the nice graph. If you click into it, you can see the test that failed. So you can identify within your features that you're building, So in this case, I didn't see welcome to Midcamp STL because I changed it. I changed the verbiage on the page. So actually, just to see, this is the site that it's testing. So it says Drupal Camp. If you want to see, I can change the code to the proper and do a full behat that passes. Within the code check, here's the example, the screenshot that I gave. Sorry, I did that too quickly. So that's the screenshot. You can see this is one fail, the validation test. So it's a nice way to drill in and see, okay, what's the problem, what's the issue, I'll pick on Benji because I know him. You can say, hey, Benji, you forgot to comment something. Whatever the case may be, before it goes live. PHP unit, these are just a couple core baked-in tests that you can run. You can drill in and see the results there too. So it's a nice log of what happened, not just, yes, I ran tests. Database backups, parallel steps. If I run that, I think it should work because sometimes within the Drupal or within the Docker, the permissions change. Yeah, so that worked, but nothing changed. So, questions? Want to see any of the code? I believe I talked a little too fast, but hopefully it's there.
Will you be sharing your slides?
Yes, I will post them somewhere. I haven't posted them yet because I was doing edits this morning still.
I'm a beginner to this step, but we're just looking at needing to implement this.
Right.
I just want to clarify, it could be some pretty basic steps. So Jenkins is all running on, you're talking about using it here in Docker, but in my workflow, you might be running this Jenkins on a dev server or a test server.
Right, we have we use DigitalOcean for our testing environment. Mm-hmm. So we have a server out there, it's like we have one server, it's like the 160 gig level, 16 gigs of memory, that's running Jenkins plus all of our test sites. It's running Apache in dynamic multi-host mode, so all we have to do is create a folder within a specific structure, which automatically creates the sites there. So all of our Jenkins jobs for the clients are broken into sections. We have a section for database backup, a section for database refresh, so we can refresh the master branch on our testing environment, because it will get stale. And then all the deploy scripts and WordPress and things like that, we just have it split out, broken into folders, and then broken into jobs. One thing I failed to mention, because I couldn't seem to know it's specific, if you are doing pipeline script, and I can show you here within the configuration. In this instance, the pipeline is right here in code, but you can actually do pipeline scripts from SCRM. So you can create a Git repository and tap in to Jenkins where you just say which repository and behat client 1 kind of naming, so you can have a central repo for doing tests. I haven't started working with it, but Jenkins also supports pipeline library. So you can create a library of shared code. So if you have one procedure you use for behat, but the only thing that's different is the path that you want to run it on, you can build a library to run that, pass the path in as a variable, and then if your process changes for that test, you change it once, and all of your sites get that new process. So especially, we want to do that, especially with our deploy, because we're all of the sites, like I said, that aren't Pantheon are using DeployBot, and the only difference between it is the message that we put in the DeployBot and the site ID. So there's two variables that we can pass to that function per site, and then if we ever move from DeployBot or want to change something within the process or do other things with it, it's one change instead of 50 to 80 changes. So that's the direction we want to head in with it. We're not quite there. Anyway. See, was there anything else I can show? I think that's it. Just if you haven't seen Jenkins, I'll just give a little bit of within the Managed Jenkins and plugins. There's a bunch of available plugins, NPM, so you can do anything with Grunt, Composer, PHP. You can create a setup where if you're using GitHub as your repo, you can have it watch all of your repositories and dynamically build things. Haven't tested that because we're using Beanstalk internally, but it can just monitor your process, and if it sees a Jenkins file, process it. So it's incredibly powerful in that regard.
So again, at the beginning of this, it's been driven by a client. The client has got the Atlassian stack.
Yeah.
So strip out Bamboo. I don't know if you know Jenkins. Is it Bamboo like an equivalent of Jenkins, or?
Bamboo is similar to Jenkins, so that you can run processes. I haven't done a lot with Bamboo, but my understanding, there's a lot more available with Jenkins, but Bamboo Circle CI might be sufficient for what you're doing. There's some similarities. I don't think like Circle CI. I'm not certain that you could do like the database backup kind of thing. Maybe you could. I haven't played with that part of it, but certainly the testing and the deploy is in Circle CI. Bamboo I haven't looked at closely with. We do use Jira, and I've got Bitbucket for my personal repos, but I haven't played with Bamboo much.
You go out to the Bamboo site for the classroom, they have a comparison between Bamboo and Jenkins.
Okay.
Yeah, I looked at it in May for my talk in mid-camp, but I didn't look at it again for this one. So that's it. Thanks.